Mr. Madoda. Joining him this afternoon is the COO, Dr. Chris Maroleng, the CFO, Yolanda Belloon, and the GE Human Resources, Dr. Jonathan Tekiso. We will start with the presentation with an opening by the Group Chief Executive Officer and followed by the CFO, the CEO, and Dr. Tekiso. I've been told that members of the panel that we have to do everything from here because this is carried live on air. So those mics are not necessarily connected to the television camera. So if anything, Group Chief Executive Officer, if I can call you to come up to the mic, please.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
We good? Great. A very warm welcome to all of you. The purpose of this, thank you. The purpose of this briefing, we thought as executives we needed to just clarify where we are from a financial position and also the things that we've done to ensure that we turn around the SABC. You will remember that the board has really entrusted us with the responsibility of ensuring that we turn around the SABC. To this effect, we then developed a very robust strategic roadmap that guides us. And the focus of that is to ensure that the SABC becomes financially sustainable. We want to ensure that we are a high-performing organization that is geared towards the fulfillment of the public mandate. I must admit that we are beginning to see positive green shoots in as far as the implementation of the plans. And you may appreciate that the roadmap has been widely shared with all of the key stakeholders, including our shareholder. So whatever we do here, we ensure that there's alignment in implementation. One of the key aspects of our turnaround plan is to accelerate revenue generation. And to this effect, we are focused on ensuring that we grow our business. And the segment or the second tier to that is the whole issue of ensuring that we have diversified streams of revenue. To this, I think that the team has done quite a great job because we have seen from quarter one to quarter two, there's been quite improvements from a revenue generating point of view. In terms of the advertising, which is 85% of our business from a revenue generating point of view, we have ensured that we develop and execute very unique retention plans in as far as our clients are concerned. We've worked on all of those lapsed contracts, but most importantly, there's been a very strong drive on getting new businesses. TV collections, and we also there are beginning to see that year on year there is significant improvements from a growth point of view. But I must say that the positive growth trajectory that we've seen in Q2, it does indicate that a lot of the plans that have been put in place are beginning to bear fruit. Just to give you a sense, year to date, the revenue is at 3.2 billion. Despite all of the challenges, despite all of the market conditions that we're experiencing, we do think that the team has done well in that respect. Owing to all of the aggressive cost-cutting measures that we've put in place, by the way, these are across the organization. They relate to operational expenses. They relate to all of the issues that we need to deal with if we are to become a commercially viable organization. So because of all of those cost-cutting measures, we see that the total expenditure year to date is sitting at 3.5 billion. Very importantly, the saving that we as an organization have come up with in the past 2 quarters, it's at 463 million. For me, this is quite important because it shows that from a cost-cutting measure across the organization, we are ensuring that we're doing what needs to be done. However, this is not enough, because if you look at our net loss year to date, we're sitting at about 323 million. And the focus loss for the financial year would then be at about 805 million. Then it brings us to the most important thing. When we look at reviewing all of the biggest cost drivers in the business, is to ensure that we're running an organization that is efficient, that is effective, and that is also commercially viable. The great work that has been done, for example, in terms of reviewing the cost of sports right acquisition, it falls within the need as an organization to ensure that we drive costs, we reduce costs. This is why you may have seen in the past couple of months, there's been very, I would say, concerted efforts on ensuring that we look at all of the deals that were signed in as far as sports rights is concerned, and to look at whether are these commercially viable or commercially they make sense for the SABC. Internally, I know that the team has done a great job in terms of driving costs down. Whether you're talking about what we're doing, and it may be small things, but they really help cumulatively. Whether you're talking about traveling, whether you're looking at accommodation, and all of the other operational related costs, all of these have been reviewed. Unfortunately, all of the efforts that we are doing are not enough, because you must remember, the idea is to look at the business fundamentals, to look holistically at the organization to say, where are the big cost drivers, and what can we do as an organization to ensure that we deal with this. And I've always said this, for us it is important to have a financially viable organization in order to fulfill the public mandate, which, by the way, we have a responsibility to ensure that we deal with. In the past 3 years, you may want to know that the cost of the public mandate has been sitting at 4.2 billion. We've done projections to say in the next 3 years what would be the cost, and it's sitting at about 6.2 billion. So we are committed to ensuring that we fulfill the public mandate. Hence, we want to ensure that we drive costs in the organization and all of the inefficiencies that we see in the system. I know the CFO is going to talk to this. We are technically insolvent as the SABC. We are not able to fulfill our monthly obligations. And it's widely reported this, but I think it is important to understand that as an organization, we're not able to fulfill our financial obligations. As you may know, if we're a private company, we would have been recapitalized. And this is why we're engaging with all of the different stakeholders still when it comes to issues of government guarantees. We are engaging with financial institutions to look at extending our borrowing limit. So all of these issues, or all of these are still taking place. But I do need to put it on record that the threat of commercial insolvency is indeed increasing significantly. Which brings me to the most important thing, which is really the wage bill. You may know this, that we're sitting at 3.1 billion from a wage bill point of view. And as you know, the expenditure is at 7.2 billion. What it does indicate to us is that this is not sustainable. Hence, we've engaged with organized labor to see ways in which we can review our structure. The whole 3.1 billion, whenever people talk about it, I think it's important maybe to share a few details on this. because there has been a narrative that says that a lot of this is at a senior level. The total cost to company of the 3 executive directors stands at 12.5 million. That's not 0.4% of the overall wage bill. In terms of the group exco, the total cost to company of the group executives, it stands at 25 million. Then you have the cost of the freelancers, which is at about 500 million per annum. We have about 5 layers of management, which makes up to about 495 managers overall. And the cost to company is standing at 630 million. If you include junior managers, that number balloons to 1 billion per annum. We have always said this: when we engage in this process, we're not just focusing on any particular layer. We want to ensure that the structure that we want to come up with is fit for purpose to take the SABC to the next level. I think before I ask the CFO as well as the COO to come and say their bit, we would want to just put on record that as the executives, we are committed to ensuring that we turn around the SABC. The decisions that we'll take in doing this may not be acceptable, but we know that it is in the best interest of the SABC. We have a choice to say, do we do what is right in terms of taking these decisions, or do you let the SABC collapse? And as you may appreciate, this is a very significant institution in our country to let it collapse, and we have to do what is right. Our goal is to ensure that we build an organization that is financially sustainable. We want to ensure that this organization is a high-performing organization, but most importantly, we are committed to the fulfillment of our public mandate. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody. I am privileged to be in front of you today, as much as my message isn't necessarily very positive. At least I hope it is transparent and honest and truthful. We did prepare a slideshow, none of which you wouldn't have seen before, whether as part of our annual report presentation, certainly, and then there's a few slides which we're actually, as we're sitting here today, presenting to our board of directors and our shareholder as part of the quarterly reports. So maybe just to reiterate, I'm not going to go into all the detail. I will touch on the main themes only and try to supplement the CEO in terms of what he said. Really just to reiterate that our main source of income is advertising. As you will see later when I look at the forecast numbers, our advertising revenue is currently anticipated to be about 570 million less than what we budgeted for. That puts us again at an organizational level at about a 6.8 billion rand organization versus an organization that has a cost base that supports about a 7.8 billion rand organization. The consequence is really that we are here for today speaking about these difficult messages and actions that we need to embark upon. The main reasons for the change in the revenue, while I'm at the topic, is partly SABC 2 and 3, which is not really meeting its performance targets. That is to a large extent driven by the fact that we are unable to secure sufficient content and content of a quality that's required for these stations. It is also a legacy of the past, because typically you need to invest in this content up to 18 months before you need to broadcast. And therefore, as you are well aware, our financial situation has been a topic of the day for nearly 2 years plus going now. So we feel the decisions, the impact of decisions that were made 2 years ago And yes, you sit then with cash playing a very important part of that, or the available cash. TV license revenue is really only about 14% of our total revenue. Yes, there's always room for optimization. There's numerous initiatives that the team is implementing to improve our recovery rate. But unfortunately, even if we move that 1 billion by 100% to 2 billion, it may be then at the point where it is able to sustain us, but it is not going to be possible. And maybe while on the topic, I have now lost my train of thought. You're going to have to forgive me. But so maybe let me talk about expenditure. In the year in the 17-18 financial year, you can see the main cost drivers that we are confronted with. The big one, naturally, the payroll, which I'm not going to be touching on. But there you can see the impact of the investment in our amortization, which wasn't what it should have been. And as I said, we feel the impact there. If I look at some of the items to the bottom of the table, which is what I will call your bad expenditures, typically the kind of stuff that you wish to limit your investment in, we are in the forecast, which you'll see shortly, already reporting year to date about 120 million saving in those kind of items, which would be your other expenditure, your professional and consulting fees, etc. So numerous little efforts that has been embarked upon in the organization in the course of the past 8 months to see that return on our investment. It's everything from bringing legal services in-house, re-looking how we travel and optimizing that travel. Reducing fruitless and wasteful, for example, tremendous reduction from the past year to the current year, and that's real cash that you would have lost in the process. It's everything from cost containment throughout all levels, whether it be you're talking about PABXs, printing, everything from biscuits, milk, all those kind of things. So there's no holy cows at this point in time when it looks at how we assess our costs and determine whether it brings value or is absolutely necessary. Something like broadcast cost, it does show a relation to your revenue, because it's typically what it takes to produce. So if our revenue will be reflecting a negative movement, as with the amortization, then you will see a same trend in your broadcast cost. Signal cost is pretty much a fixed fee, if I can put it that way, for the transmitters. And it is something that we are in the process of optimizing as well as part of cost saving or cost discipline initiatives. You see the depreciation is a little bit less than what it was, or a little bit more rather, but we have also delayed or postponed or is currently reassessing all our capital investment programs, with the idea is really just to focus on absolutely critical items. Another item that has an impact if you choose not to invest in it is marketing costs. You can see a significant reduction from the 17 year there. Unfortunately, it's part of the reason why we sit with revenue that's not meeting our expectations. You see it particularly in our radio stations, where there's not enough advertising, marketing being done to attract the advertisers to it, to ultimately get listeners. And I believe the term, if you talk about TV, is eyeballs. So it's a circle that we find ourselves in and is struggling to get out of, but therefore we have multi-pronged approach, literally touching everything from revenue to cost, etc., to be able to get out of this vicious circle. So maybe let me quickly show you some numbers here. The CEO has reported our anticipated 804 million rand loss, and then significant swing from the corporate plan, which was about 280 million rand. The expenditure is touched upon. You can see the loss in the cash at that time, which is end of September, was 139 million. The cash management continue on a day-to-day basis. Our trade and other payables have increased from the year end, where it was about 1.2 billion to about 1.4 billion now. The result of inability to service all the trade creditors as we need to, because there's simply not enough cash. You sit there, so therefore also with a situation where something like investment in content, I referred to it before, had to be curtailed significantly to be able to fit into our available resources, and therefore we're back at the conversation is we're unable to secure audience share, we're unable to sell advertising revenue, and therefore we're back at the point of the purpose of this conversation. Lots of detail on this slide, but it speaks to many of the themes that I've touched upon now. SABC 1 that is performing a little bit better, but 2 and 3 is struggling. Our other revenue streams are also not meeting expectations, but we do have plans to address them, or at least attempt to do some level of recovery towards the year end. And maybe on the upside, a much talked about topic is that the investment we made in the English Premier League. We are very happy to communicate the profit that or the income that's currently being generated. We're almost at the point where we can report break even on the investment there, and about 2/3 of the season is still to come. So we're very optimistic that that investment is going to show a return. If you look at the radio stations, TV licenses, I touched on it. Our African language stations are mostly there and thereabouts. The concern is the commercial stations, and a lot, as I said earlier, relates to whether we were able to invest in marketing. TV licenses, a little bit less than what was budgeted year to date, and it will remain so towards year end, but not as significant in percentage as we have seen with the rest of the revenue. Then back at the expenditure part again, I think I'm going to move quickly past this. You would have heard all the themes. Maybe just the very first bullet, again, permanent and non-permanent employees and costs amount to 43% of the total expenditure here. And what generates revenue, the investment in program film and sports rights and marketing, that has not been able to take place. If you look at this is then the revenue forecast that I've touched upon. I've elaborated on the reasons for the underachievement. You can see it in the notes there. And with respect to expenditure, again, we are not all the savings year to date is flowing through in the forecast, and the finance team is busy engaging with business units to understand why and to ensure that we're able to at least not only stick within the expense budget for the year, but in fact be able to show the savings that we have also secured to a large extent year to date. I think that's all there. This is a familiar slide by now, just the main cost drivers. You've seen the analysis. Here, really just to show the portion of our payroll which is independent versus permanent. You can see the significant part is with respect to permanent people. These are also familiar slides. It speaks to the salary increases over a period compared to our revenue growth. As you can see, the 16-17 year, for example, how significantly the revenue drops, but the salary increases continued at levels that would reflect more or less CPI, but there's clearly a disjuncture there. Some of the main themes, again, I've touched on all of them. I think suffice to say, we are, in terms of the sports right, also many topics that's in the public domain, how we reassess the investments we make in this respect with a focus on making commercially sound decisions to the extent that is possible while honouring our mandate. And to serve the 28 million plus people that is our audience on a weekly and monthly basis. These themes I've touched upon. The main revenue streams, I think I don't know if more needs to be said about this. The detail, I'm sure the presentation might be made available, so the teams can then assess it, and we will take questions even probably beyond this through the structures that's available. TV license turnaround plans, I also touched on those topics. Advertising revenue, again, turnaround plans. The cost savings, I'm by now known as Miss Cost Saving wherever I walk around, and nobody wants to talk to me because I'm bound to reduce whatever they want or say no or implement some or other austerity measure. But I think it's not for lack of trying that we therefore can really honestly say that we are looking at everything, and when we eventually have to proceed in some shape or form with the 189 that had to be announced earlier this week, it will really be having considered everything else in our business. And that's it.
Thank you, CEO. Thank you, CFO, for that presentation. I think what's good about what has been presented here today is that the context that has been provided by the CEO and the CFO makes my job very easy. One of the headline things that I'd like to really put on the table here today is the cost of this unfunded mandate. It was indicated as a historical perspective that our unfunded mandate, which talks to the cost of carrying out the things that we are mandated to do in terms of our regulation and in terms of the provisions in legislation, is historically at around 4.2 billion. The CEO indicated that it's anticipated as a forecast projection that this mandate cost is going to increase. It will probably land at somewhere close to 6.7 billion. Now, this means that when we look at our platforms, despite what we do, it is imperative that we look at our cost base. And effectively, that is the cost of producing the things that we're required to do specifically for this mandate. The CFO shed some light on this. Some of these key cost drivers relate to signal distribution. So effectively, how much does it cost for us to basically transmit the things that are part of this mandate that we take seriously? The other important component that drives these costs relate to broadcast costs. So that is, what does it cost for us to produce these things that are part of our mandate? All of these things effectively give us a sense of what we need to be focusing on from an efficiency perspective. And this is really what we've been doing in the operations component of the business, focusing on bringing down some of these key drivers before we do anything else. And we are the first to admit that historically there have been inefficiencies in the manner in which we have carried out this crucial mandate for our country. One of the key things that we're also looking at really is asking fundamental questions on whether our organization, that is the SABC, is really fit for purpose. Is it structured in a way that allows us to basically bring down those costs and enhance our revenue? I think the key interventions that have been reflected on by the CEO and the CFO actually reflect that in the past 2 quarters, we're beginning to see efficiencies. That is from a profit and indeed a cost perspective. So we're driving down costs and clawing back on key aspects of revenue. We are very happy to report today that this has resulted in a marginally improved performance, particularly for our radio component. You would be aware that we run no less than 19 radio stations. So it's important that we address these crucial aspects of the efficiencies within our business. Within TV, we have had some challenges. We are comfortable that we are continuing to ensure that the revenues that we derive, particularly from SABC 1, are protected and maintained. We have made key strategic interventions to ensure that our audiences, which have a direct correlation with revenue, are actually enhanced on SABC 2 and SABC 3. The introduction of our CEO and our CFO in recent times have ensured that we've been able, as executive management, to really derive and create what we are describing as a robust turnaround plan within the SABC. So our turnaround plan, in essence, is very simple. It tries to maximize efficiencies in the business. And that effectively means bring down our costs and ensure that we claw back on revenue and our audiences. That is for our 2 main platforms that are on TV and radio. Let me reflect and give you a sense of what we are also doing in terms of grasping the future opportunities in the SABC. One of the key interventions to maximize revenue really relates to our ability to invest in new technological innovations. That relates to the opportunities in the over-the-top space, applications development for the SABC, ensuring that we prepare and are ready to benefit from the multi-channel future that will be seen within the digital migration, possibly DTT environment. We have seen a lot of innovation in this space, but one of the key challenges that we have as a business is that we just don't have the finances to invest the crucial capex and invest the money for new content innovations that will help us turn that corner easily. The CFO has laughed and has made a joke of the fact that she's very tight about managing our cost base. This is crucial. However, there's a realization, particularly from our CEO, that we must find funding opportunities so that we can grasp these opportunities in the future. Let me just conclude by saying, when we look at the fit for purpose structure of the SABC, it's quite clear that our wage bill is at a place that does not really allow us to benefit from all of these innovations that I've talked about. The innovations in cost containment, the innovations in revenue maximization. So it is essential that we deal with this issue that causes a continuous, let's call it, hampering on the progress of the SABC from a financial sustainability perspective and also from an operational efficiency perspective. I just want to put it on record here today that the 3 executive directors seated here, including myself, do not take lightly the task that is ahead of us. We understand that as we talk about the opportunities that we must engage in, which relate to reducing our wage bill, that this has a direct impact on the people of our organization. We don't take this lightly. However, we are in a position where, in actual fact, because of the crucial importance of this institution, we would be remiss as executive directors not to engage in this difficult task that is before us. I want to reassure the people gathered here that this executive management team will do everything in our power to ensure the sound turnaround of the SABC. We will also do everything in our power to ensure that the sustainability from a jobs perspective, but also from a financial perspective of the SABC is secure to the best of our ability. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I just wanted to go back to this slide because it tells a story in terms of how remuneration has progressed over time within the SABC, say for the last 10 years or so. You will see that those curves are giving us an indication as to how we've consistently managed to increase salaries, even though in some instances the CPI was low. And so maybe we might want to attribute this to the artistry, the wizardry of the negotiating teams in the past. But whatever it is that was happening, you will notice that it did not take into consideration, where CPI was. But the most striking of all is this particular curve here that shows us that at some point in time, revenue growth for the organization, the last one, the blue one, revenue growth for the organization was sitting at -7.3%. But and CPI was sitting at about 5.4%. And the salary increase was essentially 4.8%. So if you extrapolate for the last 10 years, you will notice that salary increases have been consistently on the rise, whereas revenue growth was consistently on the decline and CPI was more or less consistent. And I just wanted to go back to that slide to just give us a picture as to why the organization is sitting where it is right now in terms of the wage bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Tekiso. I think, having looked at what our colleagues in the communication space have been talking about, in particular, with particular reference to the Section 1, envisaged Section 189 process, can we please explain to them what is 189? Where are we in the process? What kind of engagements we've had so far with the unions, and what it means for our employees at the SABC?
All right. Thank you. What is 189? 189 is Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act, and it is the section that deals with retrenchments. Where are we at the moment? We're at a point where we've consulted with organised labour. That is our representative unions, and in essence, these are three unions, and that's Communication Workers Union, that's PEMAU, and that's MWASA. And I think people will frown at the fact that MWASA is also included, whereas they don't command a majority. The Act is very clear that when you go through Section 189, you have to make sure that you include all the unions that are representative or that have members within the organization. And so we met on the 12th of October with all unions to communicate to them the fact that the organization is in the process of invoking Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. That meeting could not proceed to the extent that we wanted it to, and it essentially was not concluded. And the conclusion was the fact that we want to put the notice, Section 189 notice, in abeyance, so that we can come back at a point where we are able to provide organised labour with all the information that they are looking for. And so we have then been able to issue a Section 189 that is fit for purpose. Fit for purpose in the sense that it encompasses all the characteristics that are articulated in Section 189 of the Labour Relations Act. And I'm just going to take half a minute to indicate to you what are those characteristics. First of all, our notice indicates the rationale as to why we're invoking Section 189. And the rationale is divided into two areas or two tiers. The first being the financial aspect, and the CFO has given you some glimpse as to the dire financial strait that the organization finds itself. So the first rationale is the financial. The second rationale is the structural reason. And the structural reason is very interesting if we understand that we have, on one hand, a contingent of freelancers, and on the other hand, we have a contingent of permanent employees. At this point in time, we have 2,400 plus minus freelancers on one hand, and then we have 3,376 employees permanent on the other hand. Now, what has happened over time is that we have found a situation where, in some instances, you have our permanent employees having their functions being taken away or taken over by freelancers, and thereby inflating the wage bill. And so this is the structural tier that I'm referring to, where I'm saying that our notice is premised on two tiers. Our notice goes further to indicate the number of positions that have been identified to be affected. Let's pause here and indicate that whereas the organization has identified that number of employees, which at this point in time is 981, the notice is very clear that Section 189 affects all employees. It affects all employees from executive directors to the lowest grade employee within the organization. But for now, the organization has identified 981 employees. The notice also talks about alternatives that have been considered before the organization can contemplate going through Section 189. The alternatives, some of which have been spoken to by the CFO, pertain to the cost-saving measures up to now we've been able to achieve. And as of now, today, we've been able to, to achieve at least 60 million rand in terms of savings. And I think she referred to, the things that the organization can no longer do because some may be perceived to be luxuries. For instance, we've done away with. These are the last bottles that you are seeing here, bottled water. This is the last stock. We're not going to, to have those luxuries anymore. And so that may be the, some of those criteria. Some of those alternatives. The notice also speaks to the criteria that we are going to follow in the event we go through Section 189. And those criteria may include things such as the organization, being what it is going to place emphasis on skills, qualifications, and experience. And then the other criteria might be LIFO, last in, first out. These are matters that we are going to engage with unions as we go through the consultation process. Notice also speaks to the issue of severance pay. The Act is very clear that, and this is the basic conditions of Employment Act now, it's very clear that severance pay will be a week's salary for every year worked. Now, our notice is very clear that in the event we go through this process, and in the event we provide an affected employee with an alternative job, and that employee decides or unreasonably decides to decline that alternative, unfortunately, they will have to forfeit the severance pay. Quite importantly, the notice also speaks to the fact that there must be the appointment of a facilitator. We can announce here and now that we've been able to submit the necessary documentation to the CCMA so that they can appoint a commissioner/facilitator who is going to be responsible for the management of the consultation process. Talking about the consultation process, there's a time limit as far as the Act is concerned, which is 60 days. The consultation process must be concluded within 60 days from the first day of consultation. And after the lapse of the 60 days, the organization can proceed with termination of employment. If we actually proceed with retrenchment. In conclusion, I just need to highlight the fact that with the organization implementing the public protector remedial action, the organization has been in a position to unravel, some of the irregularities that have happened over time, and those can essentially be classified into three. The first one being there were ad hoc increases, that were implemented without any just cause. We're delving deep into those, to begin to understand what transpired there. Secondly, there were irregular appointments, where there is no proper documentation to justify those appointments. And thirdly, there are those promotions that can never be justified in terms of a paper trail. Now, these three have essentially cost the organization an amount of 60 million rand, which is an amount that we're going to be pursuing. Before I leave, and I know I have time limitations, I just need to highlight this point quickly. The fact that the organization is now at a phase where we know what the structure is going to look like that we are looking for. Now, that structure will be premised on two very clear areas. The first one being span of control of managers. I'm sure you'll agree with me that where a manager has a span of control of 10, 15, 20 people, it just becomes dysfunctional. The other is layers. The layers below that manager that report to that line manager is also an area that we've addressed. And we like to refer to this as spans and layers. So our structure is premised on a very clear spans and layers process. Let me just make sure that I've covered everything. Yeah, and the last point is that in terms of this 60 million that I've referred to, the good advocate Vanara is busy with a process of approaching the Labour Court with a view to us being able to recover those funds. But secondly, with a view to invalidating or overturning those irregular appointments and promotions. Thank you.
Tate Takiso and the executive directors. My name, by the way, is Neo Momodu, and I'm the Group Executive for Corporate Affairs and Marketing, and also the SABC spokesperson. We will now take questions from the floor. We'll start with the first round of questions, please. Please, when you ask the question, can you state your name and where you're from?
Alrighty. Sorry. My name is Pilane Pakhadi. I'm from Eyewitness News. Just wanted to check. I just clarify the 500 million rand that you have as cost from freelancers, and the 600 odd million rand that you have from management as a wage bill. Do you have more managers than foot soldiers? That's my question.
Thank you. Can we have the next question, please?
Okay. Good day, everyone. My name is Ngesa Mvumvu from the Sunday Times. CEO, on the issue of sports rights, you didn't expand about what is happening, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. This is a very important question, especially in South Africa, where of over 13 million households that have television sets, only 3 million of those have paid TV. As far as I'm concerned, it is a big crime for the people of South Africa not to be able to watch, especially the national team of soccer, which is the most popular sport in the country. What is the plan in that regard, a conclusive plan? When are people going to see the next Bafana Bafana game on SABC? Secondly, I know one of the reasons of the financial losses of SABC is irregular expenditures, where most of the losses that have been recorded by SABC are via irregular expenditure, monies that were unduly paid to certain companies that do business with the SABC. When are you, as the SABC, going to come up here and name and shame those companies and the people that are involved in those irregular payments to those particular companies? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll have the next question from here.
Hi, it's Michael from Media Online, Media Magazine. Talking about the 60 million that SABC is trying to get back for irregular appointments and bonuses and that, is money paid to Tlali Motsoneng part of that 60 million, including bonuses given to him and the salary given to him? And then the second question would be the impact on programming, the quality of content that the SABC is going to be offering due to all of these cuts, and particularly the impact on procurement of programs and calls for shows, local shows.
Thank you, Michael. Next question, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Matlango from the Sowetan. My question is directed to Mr. Tikiso. When you touched on the SABC going to implement the public protector's remedial action, you mentioned that there's people who got ad hoc increases which can be justified. Are you able to give us examples? Maybe there's someone who got 200% salary increase, something like that. And yeah, that's it for me.
Okay. Can I now ask the responses? But unfortunately, again, they have to come from here because of the television. The CEO, can I just...
Yolanda.
Yeah, Yolanda, if you can, please come and address some of the questions.
Thank you. I'm going to speak specifically to the irregular expenditure item. Maybe just to give some context, in the 17-18 year, the irregular expenditure in the year was about 560 million. Year to date, 6 months later in the 19 year, that value is about 80 million. So firstly, there's a significant improvement in the instances that results in irregular expenditure. If you then look at the actions, now there's a host of things that contribute towards irregular expenditure. We do have plans for almost all of them. The results we are, I'm carefully optimistic that we can already see some impact of our initiatives. But if you talk about maybe it's a combination of the Public Protector's report and the SIU investigation, which speaks to irregular appointments, etc., and links to what Mtate Tekisa will speak about. There are a number of forensic investigations that are still ongoing. and when the results are published, we will then proceed as per the recommendations, and it could be a variety of actions. But I think our actions to date, even as we've conveyed in the last hour, says that we're serious about this, and we will do everything within the law to recover the money that was lost or wasted or irregularly applied in the past.
Chris?
Thanks. Let me start off by addressing the matter related to sports rights, in particular the SAFA matter. I think this issue is really in a microcosm, an example of the burden of unfunded mandates. We're mandated, as you correctly state, in the national interest to cover national sports teams like Bafana Bafana. In actual fact, if you look at the ICASA regulations, they stipulate 21 sporting codes that we are mandated to cover. So you can see that the scope of that mandate in terms of the sporting codes that we need to cover really exceeds our financial capability to provide them with equal opportunity for coverage. Let's talk specifically about our current impasse with SAFA. Effectively, the contract expired. We were notified by SAFA that they expected that we would enter into terms with them that reflected our previous arrangement, which effectively was 110 million per annum, which came to a total value over 3 years of 330 million rand. This was for the coverage of Bafana Bafana and other sporting codes that are brought to us by SAFA. We then, as indicated by the CEO and the CFO, used a matrix that we're now using that talks about our ability as the SABC to really commercialize the benefit of the acquisition of these sports rights. It's basically called, from a technical position, amortization. And that calculation gives us a sense that we are unable, at the cost of 110 million per annum, to basically turn a profit or even break even, which, because of our mandate, was the basic provision that we're looking at. We're not looking at making hyper profits. We were not even looking to, benefit extraordinarily from covering Bafana Bafana, because we understand that this is part of our mandate. But what we could not do, given the financial position of the SABC, is place the corporation at risk by entering into sports rights deals that ultimately are not financially sustainable. We then indicated to SAFA that from a cost base and what we are able to afford at the SABC, even though we do not have, the little that we have, we still made an offer of 10 million, which was effectively to take these rights on a non-exclusive basis. So what does that mean? We said the South African Football Federation were free to then provide this to other broadcasters in the national interest. We were not going to be selfish to claim exclusive rights on this. What I can say is that we hope to continue with our discussions with SAFA in the interest of really, as you indicate, bringing the broadcast of our national team to South Africans. If I can just talk on something that you did not ask about, just to give you an example of some of the sports rights that we've been able to acquire that follow this financial model that the leadership of the SABC have now mandated us from an operational perspective to execute on. It was reflected on already the positive returns that we have derived so early from the acquisition of the English Premier League. This really gives you a sense that we are not just speaking to our ability to act in a financially responsible way around the way we acquire rights, but we are doing this. I'm also happy to indicate to you that we were able to enter into a financially sustainable sports rights arrangement with Cricket South Africa to bring the Mzansi Super League, which is the T20 format that will attract both domestic and international players, cricket players, to South African shores for this fantastic showcase, which is about to launch on the 16th of November. Now, this just gives you a small snapshot of the things that we're doing from an operational and structured perspective to bring down our cost base and bring revenue. And ultimately, this should give you an example and really talk to some of the questions that were asked around content. Will the SABC continue to acquire content, especially from a local position? And how will we do it given our financial situation? I think one of the key things that we're looking at as executive management is innovative ways of looking at our ability as the SABC to generate content, also as an opportunity to support and create enterprise development within the film and content production industry. I think we will be at a stage very shortly we will be able to come forward with some of our plans that will give you a sense of also how we will acquire content in a more efficient way and in a way that really allows the industry as a whole to benefit from some of our suggestions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tekiso.
Thank you. There's a question that was raised around the fact that we have a larger number of managers. In other words, more managers than employees. In fact, that perception is not entirely correct. The correct version is the fact that we have at least about 495 managers on the basis of a staff complement of 3,376, as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the 2,400 freelancers. Now, in ratio terms, this is just about 14% of the total staff complement. Now, why are we where we are? Well, where we are because of problems around, for instance, the naming conventions of jobs. Also, the perception that if I'm a manager, then it entitles me or it positions me, to get more money. So, whereas in fact what should have happened, and this is what we're doing right now, is we should have been able to distinguish between the managerial career path, as well as the specialist career path. Because what we've ended up with is the fact that we have, in some instances, a one-on-one reporting relationship where the manager in that environment is actually supposed to be a specialist as opposed to being a manager. So we've had problems in terms of the naming conventions of positions, not so much an issue around the job evaluation. I think as far as job evaluation is concerned, we are satisfied that we have the right tool, which is credited by Deloitte, for instance, and I'm sure all of you know a job evaluation tool called Peromnis, a tried and tested system. So no issues with job evaluation system, but issues with the naming conventions of positions, an issue that we're addressing right now. So, cut a long story short, the 1,000 or so number that has been communicated across the board in terms of managers is not actually entirely correct. The correct number is 495, and that's essentially 14%, of the total staff complement, permanent staff members. There was a question around around quantification of the increases, which is a public protector matter. Now, let's give an example. For instance, an employee is supposed to be employed at a total guaranteed package of 400,000 rand per annum. They don't get appointed at that figure. They get appointed at 600,000. So there's a 200,000 rand difference in terms of this particular appointment. Secondly, you have out-of-cycle salary increases to the tune of anything between 35% and 45%. Now, you saw earlier, we showing you the trend line in terms of how salaries have increased over 10 years vis-a-vis CPI as well as revenue growth. Now, out of cycle essentially means that the employee has received their 4%, 4.8% or so for that particular year. But over and above that, management finds reason to give this employee anything between 35% and 45% increase during that same financial year. Now, these things happen in the context of the motivation being approved by the line manager. And instead of that motivation going through the correct processes in terms of protocol, it moves from the initiating manager to the CEO. It doesn't move from the initiator to HR, to CFO, to COO, and then to CEO. So there's a problem there. So I've indicated, so then you find an instance where an employee does not go through any recruitment process and get appointed at 300,000 Rand per annum. So this is what leads us to the 60 million Rand that I was referring to, which ought to be recovered. Yes. And so this also includes irregular, ad hoc, once-off lump sums, bonuses paid without any process being followed. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take just one last round of questions. We'll start there with you, Vuyo.
Hi, I'm Ashadi from the Mail and Guardian. I actually just wanted to ask Mr. Tekiso. You said earlier on that on the 12th of October, the SABC met with unions to inform them of the intent to issue Section 189. I actually was hoping that you could take us through the process from October 12th, and I'm very curious about when exactly employees were told about the the retrenchments.
Thanks, Mashadi.
Genevieve Quince from the Business Day. I've been covered on everything except for one thing politically. As far as I know, the Minister of Communications was not very happy, I think it was a month or so ago, when the SABC was talking about possible retrenchments. Have you had a discussion with the Minister? And some MPs were also not happy. Is she on board now with the retrenchments? Has there been that discussion with her regarding that? Thank you.
My name is Glorious from SABC News. I'd like to find out, how did the corporation arrive at the 981 of permanent members that would be possibly retrenched and the 1,200 freelancers? Was there a skills audit done, and are you able to share with us which departments would be mostly impacted?
Thank you.
Oh, Zikhona Chana from SABC. I think she covered my first question. You from ENCA? Sorry, people. Okay, thank you, everyone. Zikhona Chana from ENCA. The process that was followed to get to the 981 employees, and some of the irregular appointments part of the 981, which department are they mostly from? And then you say that you're not able to meet your financial payments for the month. Will there be shows cut from the broadcaster? I know there was panic around Uzalo at some point when the production company wasn't paid. Will there other be shows that will be cut from the broadcaster?
Okay, my name is Ntegu. I'm with the SABC. Reactions across political divide seem to be saying everyone is against retrenchments. Have you indeed considered that? Or maybe these are just politicians and it's just political rhetoric, or maybe political mouthwash for them to make those statements, because everyone seems to be against that from across political divide. And secondly, the board has given you a mandate, or has mandated you to save cost as much as possible. And one tool to deal with that is to deal or to tweak the wage bill. that would ultimately lead to retrenchments. Since this board took over, how many people have been appointed? And are those people, because I'm thinking the Labour Relations Act would dictate that you only go outside of the SABC, in this case, for a scarce skill. If you don't have people who are competent to do the job inside, then you can go outside. But there are people who've been appointed under the guise of this board. And will those people, when we effect the last in, first out, are they going to be the first one to be going? And in the spirit of the National Development Plan, government wants to create more jobs. It's a worrying factor for all trade federations in the country, especially now with the latest unemployment figure released. What is the SABC's contribution to ensure that indeed ultimately as a state-owned enterprise or as a state-owned company, what is your contribution to ensure that you contribute to that 5 million jobs that is envisaged in the National Development Plan? Thank you.
To end the session, Michael? No.
Yeah, Michael from Media Online again. So just to flog a dead horse, is Cloudy part of the 60 million, or is Cloudy a separate matter which you're trying to get money back from him? And then your response to those people and organizations, the unions, political parties, who are saying the SABC shouldn't have put out a notice saying it's implementing Section 189 before the CCMA mediator got involved. So the CCMA mediator should have happened first, and then SABC should have put out the statement saying it's implementing Section 189.
Thank you. Just one last one.
Last one. I think there is another comrade here who wants to ask another question. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aubrey Mutombe. I work for Sunday World newspaper. I have a question specifically on the SABC's decision to recover some monies, specifically directed to those that they deem to have been appointed irregularly, those who received unusual salary increases, and promotions. I'm quite informed to say that among those is Mr. Chifiwa Mlauzi, who is the Group Executive for Commercial Enterprises, and Ms. Nomsapili Souza, whom I believe is the Group Executive for Television. But I just want to understand something from you guys. Is the SABC prepared for the legal showdown, especially given the fact that it has had quite worrying figures in terms of legal expenditure? And the other question is, how is the SABC going to make sure that its decision do away with the perception that is likely to emanate from such an action, especially given the fact that there are already talks that those are considered to be Cloudy's enforcers. Don't you think that you are likely to be accused of the same paging that Mr. Mtsweni was actually accused of? And the other question is just a lighter one, and I believe is directed to the retrenchment itself. I just want to understand, from the 981 employees that have been identified for a possible retrenchment, how many are actually journalists? I think that will be all for now.
Zingisa again from the Sunday Times. One final one. Mr. Muruleng, since you brought the issue of EPL and the cricket rights, would you please also inform us about the cost thereof, EPL and the cricket rights, and the comparison thereof, where you decided that you could afford this, but you cannot afford the SAFA rights, And also by saying that you insist on the 10 million, are you saying that the ball now is in the court of SAFA as far as the national team of Bafana rights are concerned? Final one. I've just been informed of that there are people who are permanent staff here at the SABC, but they double up as freelancers again at the SABC. What are the costs thereof, and what is the plan going forward? Thank you very much.
Thank you. we're going to do this as well. We'll start with the CFO, CEO, and then does it take you, and then we'll end with the or do you want to come and take all of them? Yeah.
No, not all. I want to take Mtombeni's ones. Why thank you. I think the first question was in relation to the engagement with the minister, and I would not want to speak on behalf of the minister, but I do know that there's engagement and alignment at the board level. The reaction from different political parties, I think because it's a very topical issue, you know, we're expecting that there's going to be reactions from different people on this matter. But what is very important is that it's important for the SABC. And if you look at our sustainability and all of the facts that have been shared here, we cannot continue the way things are. So there is a need to review our structure and how we do things. The issue around the recommendations of the public protector, I think I just need to make it clear, nobody's paging anyone here. We're doing this on the basis that we have an obligation as an organization to act on those recommendations. But the second point is, since I got here in July, every single staff meeting you have, our employees are raising issues around these irregular appointments, promotions, as well as salary increases. So once again, we have a moral obligation to ensure that we correct this. We are not paging anybody. But, and I think the idea here is to ensure that from a good governance point of view, we align. But most importantly, we want to ensure that from a staff or employee point of view, they know that we act when they're raising issues of concern. So I think those are the ones that I would like to handle. Yolanda? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you, CEO. There was a question that was asked about shows on SABC and whether we will continue or they will be affected by the financial situation that we face. Here's the situation around content from a TV perspective. Let's call it approximately 80% of revenue that is derived from TV is garnered from around 6 content platforms that we have on our various platforms. Of those 6, the majority of those programs or content are found on SABC 1. We have the ability really in a day to maximize on revenue in 4 hours of the day, which we describe as prime time. So it gives you a sense that what we should be looking at is not necessarily cutting down on content that derives the revenue and brings the audiences that we require during this peak 4-hour period that we're able to maximize in terms of revenue. But what we are actually looking at is ensuring that we generate, as I indicated before, the ability to generate and create more content using opportunities around enterprise development and smart partnerships with our content providers. We realize as the SABC the crucial role that we play in the industry, and we will not do anything to create, let's call it panic or destabilize the industry. In actual fact, we view them as a crucial partner, that is content producers, as a crucial partner that we will work closely to ensure the sustainability of the industry, and indeed to ensure that the SABC is in a place where we can continue to provide this crucial platform for content. With regards to our agreements with SAFA, as I indicated to you, we are still engaged with SAFA. Nothing, as you say, is off the table. We are currently engaging them, and we hope that we will arrive in due course at an arrangement that will allow us really to continue to bring soccer to the soccer-loving people of our country. I think those are the questions that. As indicated, that is the commercial terms of our arrangements are subject to non-disclosure arrangements. To an extent, we cannot give you the exact details. What the CFO did indicate, in particular when it comes to the EPL, that we still have 3/4 of the season to go, which ends, that is the English Premier League season, which ends sometime in May of next year. And already the CFO indicated to you that from a revenue perspective, we are almost at break even with so much more of the season to go. When it comes to the T20 arrangements, as I indicated before, as you would be aware from the previous press conference that we held, we simply cannot go into details around the commercials on that.
Thank you, sir.
Everything I'm going to say here, we must all remember that these things are going to be subjects of discussions when we meet at the consultation sessions with organized labor. The first question was, what was the process followed from then to now? Then was the 12th of October, now is the 29th of October. As I said earlier, we met with organized labor, and in that meeting, we agreed that the notice, Section 189 notice, would be put in abeyance until such time that we have covered all areas that were highlighted by organized labor. 1. 2, we did that in the interest of transparency and continuing to develop the relationships that we have with organized labor to date. So the notice was issued on the 29th of October, day before yesterday, at 5:58 p.m. The next question was, how did the organization arrive at 981? The arrival at 981 was premised on a fit-for-purpose structure, which, as I said, needs to look at our spans and layers. 2, I've indicated that in certain areas we have found that there's duplications, that you have a permanent staff member on one hand doing a particular job, and then you have 3 freelancers doing exactly the same job. So we had to look at those things to make sure that we arrive at some numbers. But let me hasten to add that we have indicated quite clearly, categorically, that the retrenchment process affects everyone. But for now, we've been able to identify the 981 positions. Another question was, does the retrenchment process include those that are cited in the irregular process? The answer is yes. How many people have been appointed with a new board? Let me just give an example. Advocate Vanara was appointed with effect from the 1st of October now. The COO was appointed in February this year. Sorry. The CEO was appointed 2 months ago. July, yes. And the CFO was appointed June this year. So the team that you're seeing here is actually new. Question is, the answer is no more than 50 people were appointed during the currency of this new board. Now, these new ones, the new ones, will they be candidates for LIFO when it happens? Okay, let's put this in context. The context is that there are going to be criteria that are agreed upon or that are going to be consulted upon by the parties. And the criteria that we have in mind right now are 2, essentially. The one is skills, qualifications, and experience. That's the first one. The second one is LIFO, last in, first out. Now, in terms of the first one, we are going to be careful that the SABC retains those critical skills that are making it certain for all of us to be able to switch our TVs every day and see all those channels. Those are critical skills. Let me also take this opportunity to say, even though there's a moratorium on recruitment within the organization right now, the organization is careful to say we will not compromise those key critical positions, such that if somebody were to leave this organization today, they resign, they retire, what have you, and they are a critical skill, we'll make sure that we replace that individual. Because the last thing we want to see is an outage, purely because we're running short of skills in key critical areas. Is Saudi part of the 60 million? Let me just say that there's a legal process happening between the former COO and the organization. And the figures that I have seen is something around 22 million, which can be legal costs, and then the other figure is 15 million, which I believe is a bonus. So those numbers, maybe they form part of the 60 million. But let's just make sure that we understand there's a legal process happening right now. The issue of the CCMA mediator, the question is, we should have appointed a mediator before the notice. No, the Act is very clear. Section 189, capital letter A, says that the organization, the employer, needs to attach the notice, right, to the documentation when you request a facilitator / commissioner. So it's as per the Act, it's legal. Question was pertaining to our executives, whether the two executives are irregular appointments. We're not going to go into finer details to a granular level at this point. Suffice it to say that there are irregularities that we've identified, and we're focusing on those. From 981, how many are journalists? Again, the Section 189 process affects all the departments, all the divisions, all the categories within the SABC. Freelancers doubling up as or permanent employees doubling up as freelancers. If that is happening, then it's illegal, because as a permanent employee, you have one contract and one contract only that entitles you to one salary. And if you are earning additional salaries and you are moonlighting as a freelancer, we are coming for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your time. We would like to thank you for coming this afternoon. This is the end of the press conference.
Thank you, guys.
We are coming.
Every day and during every hour of our time. Each one of us towards a realizable dream and nightmare. With every passing second, they advise, with rhythmic and hypnotic regularity, get rich, get rich, get rich.
If the king will be involved in looting community money